Hello. I don't know if this is the same in your country, but here in Finland, we have these huge campaigns to drive people to vote in local elections, because voter turnout in local elections is often poor. It is, however, a very important election to vote in because your local government impacts your life in a much more fundamental way than the policy decisions at the national government level do. Your local government, after all, is the ones that keep the streetlights shining, that ensure that your potholes are, that look after your cops and make sure that the laws and bylaws are applied correctly. Local elections therefore matter. Why is this important from a fantasy world building perspective? Well, because fantasy towns also have local governments. And that is what I want to discuss today. The impact that local government can have in a fantasy world, from its impact on role-playing characters to the way in which you can use it in plot lines in your story if you're an author in order to build tension into your characters' lives. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds. If you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button and let's get on with the show. So what does a local government actually mean? Humans are social animals, and social animals need some form of organization. Things don't just happen by themselves. Even in, say, a Stone Age tribe, there needs to be somebody who is organizing the big hunts so that there's enough meat in the winter months to survive the Ice Age level winters. Even in a nomadic desert culture, somebody needs to make sure that the holes are dug correctly for the ephemeral rivers to bring the water up to the surface so that the whole tribe can drink. This normally creates a leadership situation where there are people who lead these activities and ensure that they happen. And that, in essence, is what local government is. In a medieval society, a local government could be your sheriff appointed by the king who raises the hue and cry when a murderer needs to be found. It could be a reeve who collects the poll taxes for the local baron. It could be the local baron himself in small communities who ensures the safety of his farmers. So if there's a wolf attack, the local baron would send his hunters out to go take care of the wolves. In a modern society, your local government is everything that makes your town run. From fixing your potholes, making sure the streetlights are burning, ensuring that there's clean water. All of these things devolve to the local government level. So your local government really matters. For most fantasy worlds, your king is far away and can't necessarily enforce his will a lot because he's distant from the population. Communication isn't as modern as it is in today's day and age. What this results in is the policy decisions of the king is removed from the lives of the people who live in the kingdom. The people who live in the kingdom don't see the king in his shining city. They see their local sheriff who could be a drunk and doesn't hunt down bandits when they come and prey on the town's good people. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the people of the village never see the king, who is a tyrant and a bully, but they do see their local baron, who protects them from the excesses of the king, is a really good guy and allows them to take their time paying their taxes and accepts things like a wheel of cheese as a tax rate as opposed to demanding a gold coin. When you're world building, it's often tempting to build at the national level, to build the country, the kingdom, the emperor, all of the big picture governmental pieces. But what's going to matter to the characters is who is in charge here. Who is in charge in my village, in my town? Or maybe I'm traveling. Who is going to be in charge in the next village? How is that person selected? What am I walking into? Okay, so that's what a local government is. What are the things that impact what a local government looks like? The first is size of the population. A large town has a lot more going on than a small farming village. For this, I'm going to turn to my own work to illustrate. If you look at the map, you will see that there are two baronies marked here. The one is Lutav and the one is Somfa. Both baronies are the same size map marker, but they are fundamentally different. Lutav is a small farming community in the Arctic North. Somfa is a city where 1 million people live that is at the center of the river barge trade network. Despite being the same in principle local government, as in they're both baronies, these two communities could not be more different. In Lutav, the local government is basically the baron and his children, because all that they need to do is ensure that the roads are in fair working condition, dangerous animals that come to prey on the farms are hunted and taken care of, and if anyone in the community gets into trouble, they can come to the baron's manor house and request assistance, and they will get it, because it is a small, tight-knit community. So despite the baron holding noble rank, his people see him as one of them. They are all in it together in the small farming community in the harsh conditions of the far north. Somfa is a different story. Here, the baron has far-reaching ambitions. The people of Somfa very rarely see their baron. They have a local rechtspreker who looks after the law. They have a town guard who ensure the safety of the people, because the merchants pay for a town guard to be in place, because there is so much trade going on in Somfa that the expense of maintaining a town guard is worth it to the merchants. The baron has a complex local government, including tax collectors who answer to the chamberlain, clerks who maintain the records of the barony. It is a dramatically different approach to local government in its complexity due to the size difference. And bearing in mind that both of these baronies are in the same empire, and yet they are still so different. Your local government is also fundamentally affected by the type of culture. A stationary agricultural society has got a different local government from a nomadic society. Your nomadic societies, just as an example, would require an ambassador-style local government because they encounter so many different cultures as they travel. They have to have somebody who is capable of negotiating with other groups, as well as somebody to run the group internally within the nomadic traveling society. So size and culture are your two big influencers on what your local government looks like. But what types of local government can you have? The first style of local government that I'd like to talk about is the elected style of local government. This is more common than you might think at first. While we have often been willing to accept kings and emperors as non-elected leaders, our local mayor, the people have often demanded a say in. Katherine Kerr uses this style of government in the Bardakinian Islands, where each island elects their own leaders to run that island. And she uses this as a fascinating juxtaposition with the more authoritarian Deverryan society that is where the main story is located. The Bardakinians see their leaders as one of them. They don't have this pomp and ceremony that the Deverryan leaders do. Now, as I've said previously when I've spoken about nobles have to continually flex their position, because otherwise people might start to think that they're in fact not entitled to just be the rulers. But an elected ruler does not need to flex. They have been put in place by the people that elected them. And so the pomp and ceremony around elected leaders is much less than the pomp and ceremony around a noble leader. You can also have a more informal approach to election. So rather than an explicit election, it can be that you are the leader as long as you have the support of a certain portion of the population. Normally, this comes down to having the support of the warriors, whatever the warriors are in your culture. And you can see this very well in George R.R. Martin's books in A Song of Ice and Fire with the Dothraki culture. When Khal Drogo falls ill and doesn't recover, his Khalasars start breaking up, and the warriors start forming new Khalasars as they gain support of the other warriors, and they start leaving Dany's Khalasar, and only a few warriors remain. This is what I mean by it is a leader that is elected. It's not official, formal elections as we think of them, but you only hold authority because you are supported by the majority of whatever the enfranchised population is. So in the case of the Dothraki, the enfranchised population is the warriors. What are the benefits of having an elected local government? Firstly, elections themselves are really interesting. You can have people involved in trying to make certain that a certain person wins. You can have points of the plot dependent on who wins an election. You could have characters forced into trying to prevent an election. There's a whole suite of things that you can do around elections that make for interesting stories. You can also very quickly establish a bull in a china shop effect. So your characters walk into this complicated local election scenario where people have support of this one versus support of that one, and there's this complex network of favors that comes from negotiations and elections and horse trading in politics, and they just roughshod run into everything, and it's just chaos everywhere as they basically explode networks of politics that have taken years to negotiate. And that kind of effect can both create enormous conflict and create a situation where you can really explore in depth what the politics in your world means from the perspective of an outsider and allow the reader to understand the politics of your world. Elected local councils are not your most common form of local government, of course. Your most common form of local government is probably your appointed government. Now, what I mean by appointed is either somebody who's born a noble, or somebody who's appointed by a noble, or somebody who's appointed by the church, or even a luck-based government, so somebody whose name is drawn out of a hat. This is any government where the people have no direct agency in selecting who is governing them, and it is not based on merit. I think we've all seen a lot of this in fantasy. The Sheriff of Nottingham, famously from Robin Hood, who's always the villain of the piece and appointed by King John, and eventually de-appointed by King Richard or killed, depending on the version of the story you're listening to. And this is one of the primary benefits of this form of government. You can arbitrarily appoint somebody. Why is there this cruel sheriff? Why is he allowed to stay in power? Because the king put him here, and people have to respect the king because the king has got a lot of soldiers. Or conversely, why is this kind baron protecting the people from the king? Because he was born to the position and the king can't move him out of it, and he uses his position to protect his people. Remember, local government is about the person. It's very rarely about policy. Local government is intimate. The character of the leader matters a lot more than the character of the leader in the national government matters. And then lastly, you can also appoint local government by means of merit. So you could have some kind of exam, some kind of test, some kind of physical contest, etc. The benefit of this is it can be very clear why somebody is in charge. It can be very simple to put somebody in charge. The downside is that you can end up with an idiot in charge. Let's say it's a foot race to decide who's mayor. Somebody can be fast, but not very smart. This can be a great thing if what you're looking for is some conflict around that point, though. So merit-based local governments can be a very interesting avenue to explore. You can, of course, also take a mix and match style of government. This is what I did in my original historical tribal society that used to live in the Bloedben. There was an element of meritocracy in that there is a shaman who is a mage, so you have to be a mage in order to fill the shamanic role. And then there is a rechtspreker, a speaker of law, who is elected from the people of the tribe. And these two work together to lead the tribe. So you can mix and match your different types of local government. Just bear in mind that it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a very complicated local government for a very small population. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a very simple local government for a very complex city. So do think about the size of your population and the complexity of the culture when you're constructing your local government. And that is my take on local governments in fantasy worlds and why they are important. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please do give it a thumbs up if you did. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time World.